I'm not sure why this keeps happening, but I keep playing games for this channel that I don't completely love. I'm not at all saying I've hated what I've played. I enjoyed most of them to some extent, but I just keep picking the ones that aren't my favorite. Minus League of Enthusiastic Losers, I really liked that one. Anyway, I have two theories. Either I was too depressed to like them, or the games just weren't my thing. I think both are equally likely. This game was the same, kinda. It's a cute and quirky game. It has its flaws like anything, but they did make it a little bit more difficult to complete. Interestingly, I took some time between playing and writing this script, that whole depression thing, and I actually think of it a bit more fondly than I did right after I finished it. That largely comes down to something more personal. I tend to forget the negative stuff and only remember the good things about any given experience. It's a blessing and a curse. I'm not sure if that's something I'd want to change or not, but Jesus Christ, it's rough when I talk to a friend about something that happened, and I cannot for the life of me remember that someone got injured. All I remember is that I had fun that day. True story, by the way. Hey, I'm Jen, and welcome to In One Sitting, the series that explores games that can be completed in 5 hours or less. In this video, I'd like to talk about Edgar, Bokbok, and Boulzac, its flaws, its strengths, and everything in between. One of the things I enjoyed most about this game is the art style. It's really unique, sort of a 2D type vibe, which can be effective when done right, and I believe this game did it well. It's hand-drawn and whimsical. It's cozy too, even if that word is a bit overused. Seriously, I play a lot of cozy games, but can we please figure out another word to use? I actually really like the music for this game. It helps set the weird vibe, and I wish I could have found the soundtrack online. Unfortunately, I couldn't find it, official or otherwise. I would have used a lot of the songs if it were possible, but we'll all have to settle for the game's end credits song at the end of this video. It's the only song I have without game sounds on top of it. Kind of a bummer, honestly. I could totally see myself vibing out to the soundtrack in my car at an unhealthy volume. The humor is silly and offbeat, and definitely different from most other games I've played. It's charming in its own right, and I tend to enjoy things that are weird and wacky. It's a spiritual connection from one weirdo to another, Like recognizes like, or whatever. Along that line, the thing I really appreciate about Edgar, Bokbok, and Boulzac is that it knows exactly what sort of weird it wants to be. Some games feel like they're having an identity crisis. Relatable, for sure, but probably not what they're going for. The game doesn't have that at all. It is consistent in quirkiness and has a very solid identity, which is a feat within itself. It leans very heavily into absurdity and surrealism. It focuses on small-town weirdness and odd characters, two things that go hand in hand beautifully. Maybe that's an overused trope, just like the word cozy, but I digress. Sure, the game's not super deep or trying to say anything exceptionally profound, but the absurdity gives it a unique personality, and that's worthy of recognition. Exploration in this game is surprisingly fun at first. I enjoyed moving from area to area, finding new people to chat to, and taking in the town's charm. The progression from area to area and story beat to story beat feels pretty smooth. However, that smoothness eventually gets a little dicey. Not quite, I rolled 3 consecutive ones during my last Dungeons & Dragons sessions dicey, but still. The first hour or so is where this element shines as you discover things for the first time. But eventually, you have to backtrack through the same scenery over and over, and that does get a little tiring and repetitive. Yes, its vibes are compelling, but having to look up a walkthrough in the last 15 minutes of gameplay to prevent more excessive backtracking is frustrating, and that's what I had to do. Maybe a lot of that is my own skill issue, it likely is, but still, I don't enjoy having to outsource my puzzle solving. Gameplay is, in general, straightforward, at least in theory. Go here, talk to this person. But in reality, the game will eventually ask you to understand something that it doesn't explain very well. And that leads us to our next segment. Edgar, Bokbok, and Boulzac is charming right up until it isn't. It wins you over with personality, but loses you in frustratingly bad translation. In my mind, this game was held back by this, which is something that is largely avoidable. I will say, though, that this is incredibly relatable. I've confused people so many times by not speaking effectively, and I'm a communication major, and English is my first and only language. I'm not sure what to tell you. Back to the game. There's awkward phrasing and often confusing dialogue, and even typos that pull you out of the experience and cause comprehension issues. I know a lot of that is my own personal hang-up, as I tend to painfully notice small mistakes like that, but that said, the typos are frequent enough that it was distracting to my experience. I blame the fact that my mother was an English teacher for 40 years, drilling proper grammar and spelling into my head. I often found myself stuck because I didn't always understand what the game was asking me to do, not because the game is difficult at its core. These little cracks added up over time, making the experience less polished and smooth than it would have been without them. These cracks made gameplay much more difficult. I found myself banging my head against the proverbial wall several times. These issues broke my immersion and created frustration that shouldn't have existed and definitely was not intentional. It also slowed me down and caused unnecessary backtracking, like I mentioned, which got really tedious really quickly. Polish is not the end-all be-all of games. There are a lot of games out there that are fairly rough around the edges, but win you over with enough charm and fun that it doesn't matter. This game almost got there, but fell just short enough that I noticed. A game can have heart and humor, but if it can't clearly talk to you, it kinda starts to feel like you're trying to read a book underwater. You can try your best, but the fuzzy, washed-out ink becomes difficult to process. In games, writing clarity leads to design clarity, and that makes a game far more accessible. Edgar, Bokbok, and Boulzac is a good example of why good localization matters. In every game I play for this series, I give a rating on an emotional damage scale. It's fairly arbitrary, if I'm honest, but it's kinda fun. The score is based on how much a game stuck with me emotionally. In Edgar, Bokbok, and Boulzac, I found myself far more confused than emotional. Low damage, decently high confusion. So with that in mind, I score this game a 1 out of 10.
Emotional damage!
I didn't really feel too emotional during or after this game, but I did think about it after I finished playing, and that should be reflected somewhere. Now, if this rating was about confusion rather than emotional impact, then it'd score a 6, but that's not the point. Edgar, Bokbok, and Boulzac unintentionally gives its players a lesson in effective game design. Small details matter. Good translations equal a better experience. Sure, charm and wit can carry a game, but only so far. I firmly believe that if this game were shown more care in terms of its wording, typos, polish, and translation, it would have been a lot stronger. But even so, this is a game worth playing if you can look past those sorts of mistakes. Because despite its issues, I still enjoyed it, and you might too. That's all for now. See you next time, and as always, thanks for sitting with me.
Comme un loup dans l'espace, dans un cercle de glace.